You already know the feeling. That quiet moment when everything goes still and you realize something has shifted. Not with noise, not with drama, just a slow, heavy silence. That is where this begins. If this kind of truth speaks to you, consider subscribing. More of this every week. Calm, grounded, real. Now, let us go deeper. There is something that rarely gets spoken about, not in conversations between men, not in books, not in therapy rooms. It lives in the space after a relationship ends, after the silence settles, after the door closes. And it belongs to her, not to you. But it shapes everything. It shapes how she behaves afterward. It shapes what she says to her friends. It shapes why she reaches back out, sometimes months later, sometimes years, and most men never understand what it actually is. They think it is about them being missed. They think it is about love returning. They think it is about regret in the traditional sense. But it is something older than that, something quieter, something she will never name out loud, because naming it would mean facing it. And most people do not face the things that scare them most. They circle around it. They distract themselves from it. They fill the silence with noise. But the fear is still there, sitting in the corner of her mind, waiting. And here is what that fear actually is. It is not the fear of losing you specifically. It is the fear of what losing you revealed about her. Read that again slowly. It is the fear of what your absence exposed. When you were present, certain things stayed hidden. Certain truths stayed buried. She could define herself in relation to you. She had a role. She had a dynamic. She had a mirror. And that mirror, whether the relationship was good or broken, was still a mirror. It still gave her a reflection. And when you left, that reflection disappeared. And what stood in its place was just her, alone with herself. No role to play, no dynamic to lean into, no story to tell that involved a shared future, just her. And for many people, that is the most terrifying place to be. Not heartbreak, not loneliness in the traditional sense, but the confrontation with self, the confrontation with the question, who am I without this? That question is not romantic, it is existential, and most people are completely unprepared for it. This is where the fear lives. Not in missing you, not in wanting you back necessarily, but in realizing she does not fully know herself without the context of someone else. That is the uncomfortable truth, and it applies to many people, men and women both. But today, we are speaking about what happens to a man when he understands this. When a man truly understands this, something shifts inside him. He stops taking the reach back personally. He stops interpreting the late-night message as love rekindled. He stops reading nostalgia as evidence of his worth. He begins to see clearly. He begins to understand that her fear is not a compass pointing toward him. It is a mirror pointing toward her. And that distinction changes everything. Now let us talk about who you are in this moment. Not who you were in the relationship. Not the version of you she knew. The version of you that is standing here right now, reading this, thinking, processing, growing. That version of you is different. Not louder, not angrier, not more defensive, just clearer. When a man goes through loss, real loss, the kind that strips away the familiar, he faces the same mirror. He faces the same question. Who am I without this? But here is the difference between a man who breaks and a man who builds. The man who breaks runs from that question. He numbs it. He fills the space with distractions. He chases the next thing before he has understood the last. The man who builds sits with that question. He does not rush it. He does not perform his way through it. He just sits. He lets the silence teach him, and slowly, word by word, day by day, he begins to answer it. Not perfectly, not all at once, but honestly. And that honesty is the foundation. That is where the real man emerges, not from conquest, not from achievement, not from getting her back or replacing her quickly, from honesty with himself, from sitting in the discomfort long enough to learn its shape. This is something most men are never taught. We are taught to move forward. We are taught to push through. We are taught to be strong in a way that means never stopping. But the deepest strength is different. The deepest strength is the ability to stop to be still, to face the reflection in the mirror without flinching, to say, "This is who I am right now, not who I wish I were, not who I will be someday, who I am right now in this room with this silence." And that act of honesty is the beginning of everything. Now, here is something that men rarely talk about. The identity that gets built inside a relationship is not always the truest identity. Sometimes we become a version of ourselves that was shaped by what she needed, or what the dynamic required, or what kept the peace, or what kept her close. And over time, that version can feel like you, but it is not fully you. It is the you that was negotiated, the you that was adapted. And when the relationship ends, that negotiated version no longer has a place to live. It becomes unnecessary, and that can feel like loss. But it is actually release, because underneath the negotiated version, underneath the adapted self, there is the original, the man who existed before he started shaping himself around someone else. That man is still there. He has been there the whole time, waiting patiently, not angry, not resentful, just waiting. And the work of this season, however long this season lasts, is to return to that man, to excavate him, to remember what he cared about before caring about what she cared about, to remember what woke him up in the morning before she was the reason, to remember what made him feel whole before wholeness became something he looked for outside himself. This is not bitterness, this is archaeology. This is the careful, deliberate work of uncovering what was always real. And it takes time, more time than most men allow themselves, because we live in a world that rewards speed, that rewards output, that says you should already be over it, you should already be focused, you should already be building. But the deepest builders know something. You cannot build on a foundation you have not inspected. You cannot build a life on top of unexamined grief. You cannot build real confidence on top of unacknowledged loss. You have to go down before you go up. You have to clear the debris before you pour the concrete. And the debris is not weakness. The debris is just evidence that something real happened, that you were present, that you invested, that it mattered. A man who feels nothing after loss did not lose much. A man who feels deeply had something real, and feeling deeply while remaining standing, while continuing to move forward, while not collapsing into bitterness or obsession. That is one of the quietest forms of strength that exists. Now let us return to her fear, because understanding her fear is not about her. It is about you understanding the nature of attraction. Not superficial attraction, not physical attraction, but the deeper kind. The kind that pulls people toward a man not because of what he looks like or what he owns, but because of what he is, because of the quality of his presence, because of the way he occupies space, because of the steadiness he carries. When a man loses himself in a relationship, when he bends and negotiates and shrinks to maintain peace, the attraction erodes, not always quickly, but inevitably. Because attraction, at its deepest level, is a response to authenticity, to groundedness, to a man who knows who he is and does not require her validation to remain that man. That is what draws people in, not the performance of strength, but the reality of it, not the appearance of having everything together, but the quiet certainty that even when things fall apart, you will remain, you will stand, you will find your way through. That certainty is not manufactured. It cannot be faked for long. It is built through experience, through difficulty, through choosing yourself on the days when it would have been easier not to. And here is the irony: the man who chooses himself, the man who does the inner work, the man who stops bending his identity to fit someone else's preferences, that man becomes magnetic, not because he is trying to be, but because authenticity is rare, because groundedness is rare, because a man who has walked through his own darkness and come out the other side with his values intact, his clarity sharpened, his presence deepened, that man is genuinely uncommon, and uncommon things are noticed, not because they announce themselves, but because they simply are what they are. And what they are speaks louder than anything they could say. This is what she fears losing, not the relationship, not the dynamic, not the version of you she used to manage or take for granted. She fears losing the version of you that she now sees, the version of you that emerged after, the version that stopped explaining himself, the version that stopped pursuing, the version that got quiet in the best way because that version is new, that version she does not fully recognize. And the unfamiliar, when it carries this kind of weight, is deeply compelling. She cannot name it. She cannot explain it to her friends. She just feels it that something is different, that something has changed, that the man she thought she understood is no longer entirely readable, and that uncertainty, that slight unspoken uncertainty, is far more powerful than any grand gesture you could ever make. This is the truth that no one tells you. The most powerful thing a man can do after loss is not to win her back, is not to make her jealous, is not to post carefully curated images of his improved life. It is to actually improve his life, not for show, for himself to wake up every morning and ask the honest question, what would the man I respect most do today? And then do that, not perfectly, not dramatically, just consistently, day after day, week after week, month after month. And over time, that consistency compounds. It becomes posture. It becomes tone. It becomes the way you move through a room. It becomes the quality of your silence. It becomes undeniable, not to her, to you. That is the only opinion that ultimately matters, not because other people do not matter, but because when you become solid to yourself, when you are no longer seeking external confirmation to feel real, when your sense of who you are is not dependent on whether someone else validates it, everything changes. Not just in relationships, in everything, in how you work, in how you lead, in how you speak, in how you rest, in how you face difficulty without collapsing, in how you celebrate without losing yourself. Solidity, that is the word. Not hardness, not coldness, not the kind of strength that keeps everyone at a distance. Solidity, the kind of strength that allows you to be fully present because you are not afraid of being moved. The kind of strength that allows you to feel deeply because you are not afraid that feeling will destroy you. The kind of strength that allows you to love honestly because you are not building that love on top of a desperate need to be loved in return. That is a different level of masculinity. It is not what is shown in movies. It is not what is celebrated online, but it is what the most respected men in any room carry quietly, without announcement, just their present real. Now let us talk about self-respect because this is the foundation beneath everything. Self-respect is not arrogance. It is not the loud declaration of your own value. It is not the need to remind others of your worth. It is something quieter. It is the daily act of holding yourself to the standard you believe in, even when no one is watching, even when it would be easier to let yourself slide, even when the old patterns are calling. Self-respect is the decision to not send the message you should not send, to not revisit the place that no longer serves you, to not renegotiate your values because loneliness is pressing against you tonight. Self-respect is the small, unglamorous choices that accumulate into something unshakable. And when a man operates from genuine self-respect, something remarkable happens. He stops needing to be chosen because he is already choosing himself every day in the small moments that no one else sees. He is choosing himself, and a man who chooses himself has a different kind of energy. It is not aggressive. It is not entitled. It is just settled, like he arrived somewhere, like he is not waiting for permission to be who he is, like he already knows the answer to the question. She is still trying to figure out that settledness, that arrival. That is what changes everything. Not the clothes, not the achievements, not the external signs of success, the internal settledness, the quiet knowledge that whatever happens, whatever is chosen or not chosen, gained or lost, accepted or rejected, you remain intact. You remain whole. You remain you. That is the most powerful position a man can stand in. And it is not given. It is built through exactly the kind of difficulty you are moving through right now. Through the loss, through the silence, through the resistance of returning to what no longer serves you, through the discipline of continuing to move forward on the days when forward feels impossible. This is the work, not the gym, not the income, not the social media presence, the internal work, the honest, uncomfortable, unglamorous inner work of becoming a man who is real, of becoming a man who is present, of becoming a man who is solid. Because that man is rare, and rare things are never truly forgotten. Not by her, not by anyone who encountered him while he was becoming, but more importantly, not by him. He will not forget the season that made him. He will carry it not as a wound, as a marker, a point on the map that says, this is where things got hard, and this is where I chose to stay true. And that marker will guide him for the rest of his life. In every room he enters, in every relationship he builds, in every moment where the old path calls and the new path requires something harder, he will remember and he will choose again. The same way he chose in the beginning, with clarity, with groundedness, with self-respect. Now, a final thought about purpose, because purpose is the thing that outlasts all of this. It outlasts the relationship. It outlasts the grief. It outlasts the fear, both hers and yours. Purpose is the current running beneath everything. When a man is connected to his purpose, when he has a clear sense of what he is building and why, when he knows what he stands for beyond any single relationship, he becomes ungovernable in the best sense. He cannot be fully derailed. He can be moved. He can be affected. He can feel. But he cannot be stopped because there is something pulling him forward that is larger than any single loss. And that something, that sense of direction, of mission, of meaning that extends beyond the personal, is what gives a man true gravity. Not the kind that pulls others into orbit manipulatively, but the kind that simply is. The kind that others feel when they spend time around him. The sense that this man is going somewhere real, not just accumulating, not just performing, actually going somewhere, actually building something, actually becoming something. That is the gravity of purpose. And it is irresistible, not because it tries to be, but because people are drawn to direction in a world full of drift. People are drawn to clarity in a world full of confusion. People are drawn to a man who knows who he is in a world where most people have not yet figured it out. Her biggest fear after she loses you is not that you will find someone better. It is not that you will be happier. It is that you will become someone she can no longer access, someone who no longer needs her validation, someone who no longer measures himself by her response, someone who looked at the silence and chose to grow in it, someone who became quietly and without announcement exactly who he was always capable of being. That is her fear, and that fear is your compass, not to wound her, not to prove anything, but to remind you of what is possible, of who you already are, beneath everything that got layered on top of who you are becoming. With every day you choose the harder, truer path. You are not becoming someone new. You are returning to someone real. And that return is the whole journey. That return is the work. That return is the answer to every question this season is asking. Come back to yourself. Stay. Do not rush this. Do not perform this. Just be it quietly, consistently, completely. The rest will follow. It always does for the man who is real. If this reached you today, subscribe. More of this every week. No noise, no performance, just truth.